I just watched The Flash 2023 in theaters, and I have to say, it was actually pretty great. I'll be honest, I didn't have high expectations going in. The trailer seemed a bit generic with all the references and jokes, and I was afraid it would be unfunny and lacking substance. I was disappointed by the Shazam sequel, especially since I liked the first one. So I was losing the faith that I had developed in the DC universe after things like the Snyder Cut and the R rated Suicide Squad. So I wasn't expecting much from this. But no, the filmmakers actually took a much smarter approach. Right from the beginning, it doesn't waste any time. It does one joke and then jumps right into the opening action sequence. Usually, I feel like giant CGI action sequences are pretty boring and it's hard to be invested in anything because everything that's being destroyed is something that you don't really care about. But this one was kind of fun. A lot of the gags and action set pieces were really well thought out, and the film overall is quite visually edgy. There are some shots in this movie where they show some surprisingly shocking visuals that honestly felt like it belonged in something like Rick and Morty or The Boys, which was even more unexpected in this kid friendly movie. I won't spoil any of them because the element of surprise is necessary for the humor. The movie is pretty funny. The audience I watched it with was laughing quite a bit. Honestly, a lot of the gags in the trailer worked better in the context of the movie as well. The movie doesn't feel like it's forcing you to laugh. It doesn't focus and linger on bits for too long to the point where it feels like it's expecting a laugh. Where in the trailer, the jokes feel highlighted because of how short trailers are. They often use audio to convey things that are happening off screen in a subtle way, which also adds to the humor. Now, there's this point in the movie where Wonder Woman shows up out of the blue. She shows up, they do a gag with a rope, and she leaves. And that's great. It doesn't waste any precious movie time and it doesn't disrupt the flow of the main storyline. An example of the same cameo done badly was the end of Shazam 2. When she shows up, they have Billy repeatedly talk about how he has a crush on her, which was actually something that had been mentioned early in the movie as well. It's so on the nose and it gives you way too much time to think about the fact that this was something written by someone who's expecting laughter, which is not good. Because for something to be funny in a movie, you need to be immersed in the context. When something feels artificially manufactured, it loses its potential to make you laugh. Thankfully, The Flash doesn't have this problem. It often did gags with the editing where dramatic moments would be subverted by something mundane, but it didn't overdo to the point where it felt like nothing mattered at all. It was only used in generic scenes that you've seen a million times in movies, and it felt more like a tool to make the movie feel less pretentious. The movie also made good use of the Flash's powers in its gags. Again, I won't spoil them, but they were well executed and added an extra layer of humor. The editing was snappy, and the film made some smart decisions in terms of pacing and time saving. It established many things with minimal dialogue, and character introductions were sudden and flashy, with the context provided later. It worked much better than having lengthy exposition scenes. Now, while The Flash is mostly a fun and entertaining experience, it does know when to take itself a little seriously. There are some moments that aim for emotional impact, and those moments are given the time and breathing room they need, making the movie feel like more than just a string of random funny bits. If I was to criticize this movie, I guess there are a few things to point out. The CG was a little awkward looking at times, and there were points you could tell the models were hand animated rather than motion captured. But that didn't bother me as much, to be honest. There were other effects that were pretty good, to be fair. And sometimes they used the CGI in interesting ways that made jokes funnier as well. I feel like there was one thing that happened in the end of the movie that sort of goes against the theme and the overall message of the movie a bit. But I'll talk about that in the spoiler section. And I also hated this Iris West character. The way she spoke was kind of inhuman and sociopathic, and there are a few things she does that I'll talk about in the spoiler section. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty fun experience with some good laughs in there. If you feel like watching a movie that's out now, watch this one, I guess. But honestly, I don't think I'll watch it again. And the reasons for that I'll explain in the spoiler section of this video. So, for anyone who doesn't want spoilers, skip to this point in the video to get my rating for the movie. I personally don't think that knowing these things that I'm going to talk about would ruin the movie that much. But if you're someone who's a big fan of these characters and who's hyped for this movie, you should probably watch the movie first. The movie does a pretty decent job at establishing why the Flash wants to go back in time. It also explores a lot about him as a person. So the Flash in this movie is portrayed as like a loser, which makes sense because of the trauma he's gone through, and it also helps establish his motivations for wanting to fix his life. It's also really interesting to see the Flash interact with a younger version of himself that grew up with both his parents present. This version of the Flash is happy and carefree and even has more confidence. He has a date with the girl he met in the first year of college, something that the older Flash couldn't do despite being nearly 30. And I thought that was great. Both are entirely different people. This stark contrast between the two versions of the Flash further emphasized the older Flash's hardships. There's a great scene later in the movie where the older Flash snaps at the younger one because he fails to appreciate the things he has. This dynamic worked out quite well. While Supergirl and Michael Keaton's Batman were cool additions, they weren't central characters in the story. The main focus remained on the Flash, with these appearances adding a touch of spectacle. Giving them less screen time was a good choice, in my opinion, as it allowed the Flash's character arc to receive the necessary attention it needed without overwhelming the runtime. The theme and message of the movie revolve around accepting one's past and moving forward. This theme works well for most of the film. Barry needs to overcome his past trauma and not become consumed by it. This movie also establishes that changing the past, such as preventing his mother's death, would cause chaos in the multiverse. However, there's one thing that bothers me. The metaphorical idea of having to overcome your past, along with using the ability of time travel to explore the idea of one obsessing over their past, clashes with the literal time travel rules of the universe. So, in the movie, the Flash decides to change the past to create evidence for his father's alibi. In the beginning, it's established that his dad was in a supermarket when his mother died, but his face isn't visible in the footage. Towards the end of the movie, the Flash, when he's in the past, rearranges an item to make his dad lift his head, revealing his face in the footage. While metaphorically, this change signifies the Flash focusing on what he has left rather than what he's lost, it clashes with the movie's logic that changing time causes chaos. And bear in mind that the Flash pulls off this maneuver literally seconds after he kills his own mother. He does one of the most difficult, most selfless things, guaranteeing the death of his own mother, and now he just does this shit. Which it kind of takes away from that. Because if you can do this, then you can also save your mother. There's no logical reason within the rules of the movie why both of those shouldn't be able to happen at the same time. There's also a comedic reveal involving George Clooney,
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
suggesting that things did change in some way, but it comes after the movie's main conflict is resolved, leaving the overall experience a bit unsatisfactory. This aspect bothers me and feels inconsistent with the movie's own rules. I admit the trick itself is pretty clever and how simple it is adds to the beauty of it, but I feel it would have been more satisfactory if Flash figured out a way to help his dad without time traveling. So that one thing kind of bothers me. Or maybe you could just chalk that up to time travel in movies never making sense anyway.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too.
Which is generally expected in movies. But no, for now it still bothers me a lot. And also getting back to the Iris West character, I like the moment where she reveals that she's writing an article on the Flash's dad, and that sort of disappoints him, makes him feel like she has some kind of ulterior motive or something. I thought that added a bit to the weight of his struggle, but I didn't like the bit where it turns out that she's actually a nice person the whole time. And I especially didn't like the part where she asks him out in the end. It felt like one of those trophy women things and honestly made it feel a bit like a fairy tale. And I get this is a movie and everything. It's just that I prefer movies that portray human behavior with a bit more cynicism and realism. These aspects contribute to my rating of this movie. Overall, this movie is a fun and entertaining experience. It keeps it pretty light. There's a lot of laughs along the way. And if you're looking for a movie to watch now that's out, this one's worth considering. However, I don't think I'll watch it again due to the reasons I explained in the spoiler section. So, for those who skip the spoilers, my rating for Flash is 6 out of 10. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my review, please give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down, really. Actually, both of those help the video. Oh, and subscribe to my channel for more movie related content. I probably shouldn't do this, but now I'm rethinking my first impression on the Blue Beetle trailer. Maybe it's the same case as this and the trailer just looks bad. Maybe the movie is great. Maybe it has a real sense of family and humor. But I don't know if it's a good idea to set myself up like this. We'll see, I guess. This year, August 18th.